Greetings and welcome to another Pokemon 2019 or Pokemon Journeys the series anime video. In this video I want to talk about Ash's Greninja. More specifically, I want to talk about Ash Greninja, the special transformation that Greninja had back in the XY and the Z series. Was this unique form a mistake? Is Ash Greninja something that never should have happened? I was inspired to make this video because in episode 108 of Pokemon Journeys, Greninja returned, but it did not transform into Ash Greninja, which is bad enough, but I could have accepted this except that there were several flashbacks of the XY and Z series in this episode, and Ash Greninja was removed from said flashbacks. So I got the impression that they were trying to pretend that Ash Greninja never existed. They basically erased Ash Greninja from the history of the anime. Now, I really did not talk about this much in my review of episode 108. I just noted that this happened and I said that I hope that they are not pretending that Ash Greninja did not exist. I did not really consider this to be such a big deal. It was weird, yes, but nothing serious. Or so I thought. Until something else happened, which is what ultimately inspired me to make this video. In episode 110, the opening was updated once again. There were 3 changes made to it, and one of them was to the moment when Mega Lucario's Giant Aura Sphere or G-Max Aura Sphere clashes with Gigantamax Charizard's G-Max Wildfire. This moment was expanded to include Ash and Lucario linking their auras to form the massive Aura Sphere. This expansion was done by removing Greninja from the opening, which again shows that they are trying to get rid of Greninja, which is just so disrespectful and wrong. When I saw the opening while watching episode 110 for the first time, I was like, oh cool, Ash and Lucario now link their auras and they work together to form the massive Aura Sphere. This is such a great addition to the opening. But I did wonder though how they were able to add this without making the opening longer. I did not realize that Greninja was removed from the opening in order to have room to add the extra scene. But when I saw the opening again while working on the script for my review of episode 110, I noticed that Greninja no longer appears in the opening. Now I have seen some talk that Greninja was replaced by Lucario, but I did not believe that this was the case. But when I saw that Greninja was removed from the opening to make more room for Lucario, I started to think that maybe Greninja really has been replaced by Lucario. Maybe there is some truth to this. So this video was originally going to be about this. I stopped working on my episode 110 review so that I could work on this video, while I was filled with inspiration. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I do not think that Greninja was replaced by Lucario. But I definitely do think that they are trying to pretend like Ash Greninja never existed. They are trying to cover up what I assume they perceive it to be a mistake by altering history and by downplaying Greninja entirely. Therefore, I decided to switch the focus of this video to this. So, was Ash Greninja really a mistake? Let's talk about it. Now, I wanted to start off by saying that I do not think that Ash Greninja is a mistake, or that Ash Greninja should have never happened. I am probably one of the biggest fans of Ash Greninja. I absolutely love Ash Greninja and it is one of my favorite parts of the XY and the Z series. Every time Greninja transformed, I got goosebumps and I was immediately hyped. Ash Greninja made every battle an instant spectacle of badassery and awesomeness. I think that Ash Greninja really was one of the best parts of the XY and the Z series. And so, for me, Ash Greninja was an amazing addition to the series and it definitely was not a mistake. I just wanted to make sure that no one thinks that I am saying that Ash Greninja should not have existed. I do not want anyone to think that I don't like Ash Greninja or that I agree that Ash Greninja should be forgotten. In fact, it is honestly surprising that there are people that do not like Ash Greninja, because I really did think that everyone loved Ash Greninja. But this is definitely not the case. Now at first I was like, what's the matter with people? How can you not love Ash Greninja? But after giving it some thought, I soon realized why some people dislike Ash Greninja. I do not agree with the reasoning, of course, however I do understand it. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about where I stand in all of this, before I get to the essence of the video. So now we can get to the actual heart of the video. Why is Ash Greninja perceived as a mistake? Well, there are several reasons why. Like for example, the fact that Ash Greninja is too powerful, that it breaks the balance of the anime by making Ash overpowered, and that it is unfair because the transformation does not need a Keystone and a Mega Stone. But I think that the main reason is that Ash Greninja is not real, as in it did not exist in the games. Namely, it did not exist in Pokemon X and Y. Ash Greninja was a form created specifically for the anime. It was an invention that the writers created to suit the needs of the anime. The Pokemon anime is unique when compared to most other anime in that it is based almost entirely on video games, while most other anime are based on a manga, light novel, or other written work. There are some anime that are based on games, yes, but most of these only have one season and they are meant to promote the games they are based on. They are not meant to be standalone adaptations that can stand on their own. Unlike the Pokemon anime, which is not only significantly longer than every other anime based on a game, but it is also its own thing. While it does promote the games, the Pokemon anime can still stand on its own as an experience outside of the games. Now, the Pokemon anime is not completely faithful to the games. It does take some creative liberties from time to time, but it still does mostly adhere to the games, which is why when something anime original does crop up, it sticks out like a Wailord in a sea of Joltik. Ash Greninja is one of, if not the biggest, anime-only creation that Pokemon has ever seen, which is why many believe that it never should have existed. That it was a mistake to create something that was not in the games, especially something that was so impactful and significant. Now, Ash Greninja did make its way into the games eventually, but it is only available in the Sun and Moon special demo, from which it can be transferred to the Generation 7 games. This was, and still is, the only way you can get Ash Greninja in the games. The fact that it was not made available in any other way might have something to do with wanting to erase the special form from history. Now, why was Ash Greninja created? What purpose did it serve? Why did the writers end up inventing something that did not exist in the games? Well, starting with Generation 6, every generation has an ultimate technique/transformation, which is a special, very powerful ability that can only be triggered once per battle, and that requires a certain key item. An ability so powerful that it can turn the tide of a battle, which is why it is kept in check with several limits and restrictions. These ultimate techniques/transformations all made their way into the anime because they represent their respective generations. They are one of the biggest selling points of their respective games, so the anime has to showcase these special abilities. And as the protagonist of the anime, Ash gets to wield all these special abilities, because as the protagonist, Ash can ensure that these flagship parts of the games will get the screen time they deserve. There is also the fact that the protagonist usually gets the chance to use all the powers or abilities that are available in their story. So Generation 6 introduced Mega Evolution, which is why the series based on Generation 6, the XY series, had to include Mega Evolution, and Ash had to get Mega Evolution. Simple enough, right? Well, there was a problem, which was that in the past, Ash would only catch Pokemon from the current generation at the time, meaning that in the XY series, Ash would only catch Generation 6 Pokemon, which is what he ended up doing. The problem was that no Generation 6 Pokemon except the mythical Pokemon Diancie could Mega Evolve. Therefore, Ash could not get Mega Evolution if the anime stuck to its rules and the traditions. So the only way that Ash could get Mega Evolution was to break the mold, to do something new, something different, something that would have shaken the years-old formula of the Pokemon anime. There were several ways that they could have accomplished this. The first option was to have Ash catch Diancie. This would have allowed him to still have a team of only Generation 6 Pokemon, and he would have had a Pokemon that can Mega Evolve. But this was never going to happen since Diancie is a mythical Pokemon. Now yes, Ash would go on to catch Meltan, which is a mythical Pokemon as well, but the Pokemon anime has loosened up in recent years. What wasn't possible or unthinkable before is very much possible and believable now. Just look at Pokemon Journeys. So yeah, Ash catching a mythical Pokemon is acceptable now, but back in the XY series, no way, so he was never going to catch Diancie. The second option was to have Ash catch a Pokemon that can Mega Evolve that is not Diancie, like say Lucario, but this meant that Ash would catch a Pokemon that is not from Generation 6. This would have broken tradition in a big way, because again, in the past, Ash would only catch Pokemon from the current generation at the time. This was done so that Ash's team in its entirety would always showcase and represent the newest generation. So this is a tradition that they did not want to break, especially not with a Pokemon that would Mega Evolve, since said Pokemon would end up having more significance, importance, and screen time than the rest of the team. The third option was to have Ash bring back one of his old Pokemon which are capable of Mega Evolving. These Pokemon are Charizard, Heracross, Sceptile, and Glalie. There is also Pidgeot, though Ash of course released Pidgeot. But they could have had Ash re-encounter and recaught Pidgeot somehow. Now this option did not happen for two reasons. First, as I stated in the previous option, they did not want Ash to have a Pokemon in his team that is not from Generation 6, especially not a Pokemon that was going to be Mega Evolving. Second, Ash would only bring back old Pokemon for Pokemon League conferences, and not to be part of his team again for an extended period of time. Now Phanpy rejoined Ash's team in the Battle Frontier saga, and Charizard rejoined Ash's team late into the Black and White series. But these were exceptions to the rule, and both of them returned to Ash's team in what was essentially the epilogue of that series. So they were part of the team briefly, and they were part of the team after Ash had defeated the 8 gyms of the region and participated in the League of the given region. So these Pokemon did not participate in the main story of the series in question. If Ash brought back one of his old Pokemon in the XY series so that they could Mega Evolve, then said Pokemon would have been with Ash during the main parts of the series. They would have helped Ash with the gyms and the League. They would have had too much screen time and focus for a returning Pokemon, which is why this did not happen. The fourth and the final option was to break the rules, but not the rules of the anime, mind you. The solution was to break the rules of the games by creating something that would allow Ash to have a Mega Evolution without breaking a tradition for the anime. The solution was to give one of the Pokemon that Ash caught Mega Evolution or something similar, even if they did not have this in the games. This way, Ash would not need to catch a Pokemon that is not from Generation 6. He would not have to bring back one of his old Pokemon. He would still have a team composed of only Generation 6 Pokemon and without having to catch Diancie, and he could still have a Mega Evolution. It sounds like the perfect solution, right? Which is why they went with it. And when deciding which Pokemon would get the prestigious honor of getting an anime-only transformation, they went with Greninja, who is not only one of, if not the most popular Pokemon from Generation 6, but it is also one of the starters of Generation 6, and thus, it is one of the faces of the generation. Therefore, Greninja was the perfect candidate, and so, Ash Greninja was born. An insane and unbelievable creation, but one that preserved and followed all the rules and the traditions of the anime. It was the ideal solution to a vexing problem. The issue was that while the rules and the traditions of the anime were left intact, the rules of the games were thrown out the window, which is why Ash Greninja received a rather mixed reception. Many people, like myself, loved the awesome and epic transformation that ended up helping to define an entire series. A series that is considered by many to be the pinnacle of the Pokemon anime. However, many people hated that something so crazy that went against the games was created in order to solve a rather simple issue that had other solutions that were arguably more reasonable, but that were deemed unsuitable because of the need to preserve a formula. A very simple formula, yes, but one that was the basis for one of the biggest shows in history. But despite how controversial it was, Ash Greninja still went on to leave quite a mark on the history of the Pokemon anime, and the effects of Ash Greninja would create ripples and leave aftershocks that are still felt to this day. Now it's clear that by the end of the XY and the C series, the writers did realize just what they had created, and they ended up deeming their creation a mistake, which is why they promptly decided to erase said mistake by having Ash release Greninja. A daring and questionable move that left a bad taste in the mouths of fans everywhere, myself included. Of course, Ash releasing Greninja might have been a way to nerf Ash by having him relinquish one of his strongest Pokemon ever, and not a way to get rid of something that should have never existed. This is something that was done a lot in the past. In fact, in the same series, Ash also released Gudra for the same reason. In the past, Ash was just prohibited from having overly strong Pokemon, which is why many people initially feared that Ash would release Dragonite. But again, we have thankfully come a long way since those days. Still, regardless of the original reason, Greninja was gone, and it was only recently, in episode 108 of Pokemon Journeys, years and hundreds of episodes after its departure, that Greninja was finally able to return to the anime. But its return was not without its caveats. The fact that Ash Greninja was removed from the flashbacks shows that the writers have decided to double down on their decision to deem Ash Greninja a mistake. They have decided to erase their creation from history, retconning their mistake in the process, and pretending that it never happened in the first place. To make matters worse, at the end of episode 108, Greninja was left behind once again. It did not rejoin Ash's team. And sure, the roots of negative energy, which are the in-anime story-given reason why Greninja was released in the first place, are still running rampant. So Greninja still has a reason to stay behind. But come on, after so long, Greninja should at least get to go to Professor Oak's lab, from where Greninja can return more easily. But nope, Greninja was left in the wild once again, and who knows if we will ever see it again. Excluding its very brief appearance in episode 109, of course. And excluding appearances in the flashbacks that we will likely get when Ash reunites with Diantha and Alon. Considering that Greninja was removed from the opening, it almost seems like Greninja was brought back only to retcon the story, by having flashbacks that alter history, by having Ash talk about Greninja without explicitly mentioning Ash Greninja, by having Greninja not transform even though it battled while linked with Ash. And so that Greninja could pass the torch over to its successor, a Pokemon that is very similar to Greninja, but one that remains firmly within the bounds of the games, since it does have a Mega Evolution in the games, unlike Greninja. In fact, I realize now that Lucario does replace Greninja in a way, since Lucario is basically playing the same role as Greninja, but it is playing the same role correctly and appropriately, meaning that Lucario is what should have happened in the XY and the C series. Lucario is the right, proper version of the story. So they really did retcon the anime, since they are retelling basically the same story, but in the way that it was meant to be told, while deleting all trace and record of the old version of the story, which was made up and never should have happened. They even had the two versions of the story meet, so that the past can properly be laid to rest, while the present takes over. Which is why, after mentoring and passing on its wisdom to its junior, Greninja vanished once again, leaving behind its replacement and a new history, different from the one we know. So, was Ash Greninja a mistake? Well, I guess that for the writers, it certainly was. And was Greninja replaced by Lucario? Well, this might be more of a reality than you might think. Now before I ended the video, I just wanted to share my final thoughts on the subject. First, like I said, I absolutely love Ash Greninja, and I never had a problem with it. Should the writers follow the games faithfully without experimenting? Sure, I wouldn't be against this, but I do think that they should have some room to bend the rules if it means that they can enrich the anime. Was Ash Greninja too powerful? Perhaps, but I never felt that it was, since ultimately, Ash and Greninja were still defeated by Alon and Charizard several times. Besides, episode 108 of Pokemon Journeys showed that Greninja is still plenty powerful even without transforming. Plus, like I said earlier, nowadays, Ash is not as restricted as he was before. Just look at his Pokemon Journeys team. He has a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, a Pokemon that can Mega Evolve, 2 Pokemon that can Gigantamax, and a Pokemon that has an exclusive C move. With so much power in his arsenal currently, would Ash Greninja really be that unreasonable? I seriously don't think so. Also, Greninja never took away from the other Pokemon. Even in the Kalos League, when Ash Greninja was already perfected, the rest of the team still had their chance to shine. Was Ash Greninja unfair because it required no items? Perhaps, but it's not like in the anime items are used regularly anyways. It's not like Ash was running a life orb or something like this on Greninja while still being able to have Greninja transform. So I do not think that Ash Greninja needing no items really has any bearing on the anime. This is definitely broken in the games, but not in the anime. Also, not needing items just showed how powerful of a bond Ash and Greninja had, which is nice. So basically, I see no real issue with Ash Greninja, other than the fact that it is something that did not exist in the games. And even this is something that I am okay with, since it was a cool, epic, and reasonable invention that made sense. Since it was basically just a Mega Evolution, but one born from a bond so strong that it invalidated the need for items. The only thing that I disagree with is the fact that Ash Greninja was basically deleted from the anime. Ash already released the Greninja, and even after they reunited, Greninja was still left behind. So did they really need to delete Ash Greninja from the flashbacks? Did they really have to remove Greninja from the opening, and did they need to essentially have Greninja pass the torch over to Lucario so that Greninja can disappear forever, since another Pokemon will carry on its legacy? The answer is no. No, they did not need to do all of this at all. And it is absolutely disrespectful, wrong, unreasonable, unfair, and insulting that they would walk all over the legacy of a character that is so beloved and cherished by most fans. A character that helped to define an entire series. A series that has gone down in history as one of the best parts of the Pokemon anime, thanks in no small part to said character. It baffles me to no end that they would really shatter the legend of such an iconic character for no apparent reason other than covering up what they perceive to be a mistake. Their very own mistake at that. So in order to pretend like they never made such a mistake, they are willing to shatter continuity by altering the past, and they are willing to bury everything related to the mistake with deception. This is not only wrong on so many levels, but it is also very disrespectful to both Greninja and to us the fans who love the X, Y, and the C series and Ash Greninja so very much. I can understand why they did it, but they went about it in the worst possible way. All they had to do was have Greninja relinquish its transformation and its powers to Squishy and the C2, so that they can track down the roots of negative energy themselves, while Greninja gets to stay with Ash. Then episode 108 could have played out in almost the exact same way, except that Ash goes to Professor Oak's lab to see Greninja, instead of going to the forest where he released Greninja. This way, the legacy of Greninja stays the same. The past is not altered without reason and without making sense. Greninja still gets to train Lucario, and Greninja is more likely to return in the future. All of this without it being released. It could have remained Ash's Pokemon, and everything else could have worked out better. But this is unfortunately not what happened. Instead of finding an ideal solution that does justice to Greninja and its legendary legacy, they instead opted for a solution that shatters not only continuity and history, but it also straight up depreciates both the fans and the character they love so much. Oh, how they massacred my Greninja. Don't worry, Greninja. While the writers might want to forget you, I never will. I definitely will never forget you and everything you did. And I am sure that many others will not forget you either. You will forever be engraved in our memories as the cool, epic, amazing, powerful, and magnificent badass and epic Pokemon that you are. But that's everything I have for you in this video. Again, I personally do not think that Ash Greninja was a mistake, and this video is not intended to be a negative or angry rant, nor am I disregarding or condemning anyone's thoughts, opinions, or decisions. I just wanted to discuss a subject that I feel needs to be addressed, because it is that significant, and hopefully I am not overreacting. Hopefully I am not making a big deal out of nothing. Hopefully I am not looking too deep into this, and hopefully other people feel the same way that I do. Also, I still do like episode 108. I still feel that it was an amazing episode, but now I do feel a little less strongly about it, and I now understand why some people believe that it is a divisive episode. Do let me know in the comments down below how you feel about all of this. I am very interested in knowing other people's perspectives on this matter. But that's the video, as always. Leave your own thoughts down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and would like to see more like it, then please consider subscribing to my channel. I love Pokemon and I love making videos on both the anime and the games. Also, please consider clicking the links on screen so that you can check out more videos like this right away. Thank you very much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.